Hey everyone, welcome back to MC Coin World. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for all things coins and currency. Today, we're diving into a classic from across the pond, the 1965 Elizabeth II 1 penny. We'll explore its history, design, and what makes it special for collectors today. Let's jump right into it. Welcome back to MC Coin World, and today we embark on an extraordinary deep dive into the remarkable journey of one of Britain's most iconic coins, the Elizabeth II. 1 penny of 1965, a piece that is more than just currency, more than just metal, more than just design. It is a coin that represents history, heritage, monarchy, craftsmanship, politics, economics, and the evolving nature of British society. Through time, it is a coin that stands as a bridge between centuries, carrying with it the weight of the past and the intrigue of the present. And we begin our story by first understanding the backdrop against which this coin emerged in order to truly appreciate the significance of the 1965 1 penny. We must begin not in 1965, but decades earlier, when Britain was undergoing massive transformation in its currency system, its colonial reach, its monarchy, and its identity. During the early 20th century, the British Empire was still among the most powerful entities on earth, and the coinage of the United Kingdom served not only the domestic population, but millions of people around the globe, across Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. And at the heart of British coinage during this time was the penny, a unit whose roots go back over 1,000 years to Anglo-Saxon England, and whose legacy had grown to become a central part of British commerce and everyday life. The penny was once made of silver, but over time, as inflation and economic necessity reshaped the monetary system, it transitioned into bronze. And by the time we reached the early 1900s, the bronze penny was an everyday staple of British wallets and purses, a coin that bought small goods and services, a coin that was reliable and widely accepted. The image that appeared on these coins changed with each monarch, and during the early 20th century, we saw the likenesses of Edward VII, George VI, and then ultimately Elizabeth II following the death of her father, King George VI. In 1952, Elizabeth ascended the throne, marking the beginning of a new era, not just for the monarchy, but for the entire Commonwealth. And her portrait began appearing on coins shortly after her coronation, with the first definitive coins bearing her image being released in 1953. Now, the 1965 1 penny is an important coin because it represents a transitional moment in British currency history, and it is in many ways one of the last of its kind, because it was produced near the very end of the pre-decimal coinage era, a system which had existed in the UK for centuries and which was about to be completely overhauled in 1971 with the introduction of decimalization. But in 1965, the traditional system was still in full swing, and the penny remained 1/12 of a shilling, 24 of which made a florin and 240 of which made a pound. It was a system that confused many visitors to Britain, but one that Britons had lived with for generations. And so the 1965 penny was part of this complex and historic structure. But what makes this coin especially compelling is not only the historical context, but also the design and production aspects, which we will now explore in detail. The obverse of the 1965 1 penny features the first definitive portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, sculpted by Mary Gillick, a renowned British sculptor who was chosen through a royal mint competition to create the image that would define the new queen in her early reign. Her depiction of Elizabeth was youthful, serene, and classically inspired, showing the queen facing right, wearing a laurel wreath in the style of ancient Roman emperors rather than a crown, a choice that emphasized continuity, peace and tradition over power and authority. And this portrait was widely praised for its elegance and dignity and remained in use on coinage for nearly 2 decades. The inscription surrounding the portrait reads, Elizabeth do Dei Gratia Regina Fd, which stands for Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen, Defender of the Faith, a traditional Latin legend that had been used in various forms for centuries, linking the monarch to both divine right and religious responsibility. Now turning to the reverse, we find one of the most famous and long-running designs in British coinage history. The seated Britannia. Britannia is the female personification of Britain, a symbol that dates back to Roman times, and she is shown seated on a rock holding a trident in her left hand and a shield bearing the Union Jack in her right, with the sea in the background and a lighthouse visible on the left, this design was created by Leonard Charles Wyon, the son of the Royal Mint's chief engraver William Wyon, and first appeared on pennies in 1860 during the reign of Queen Victoria, and it remained virtually unchanged for over a century. The inscription, 1 penny, appears above Britannia, and the date 1965 appears below now. The coin itself was struck in bronze, which is an alloy composed primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, and this composition gave the coin a rich reddish-brown hue when new, though over time it tends to tone and darken depending on how it is stored or circulated. The diameter of the coin is 30.8 millimeters, and its weight is 9.4 grams, making it a relatively large and substantial coin compared to modern British pennies. The edge of the coin is plain without any milling or reeding, and this was typical for coins of this denomination and type in terms of mintage. The 1965 1 penny was produced in very large numbers with over 120 million coins struck for circulation, and this was a deliberate move, as the Royal Mint was preparing for future changes and needed to ensure there was sufficient small change in circulation. But despite this high mintage, the coin remains popular among collectors, both for its classic design and its place in the timeline of British numismatics. Now, it is also worth noting that in 1965, Sir Winston Churchill passed away, and while this did not directly influence the design of the 1 penny coin, it did affect the overall commemorative coin landscape for that year, as the first ever British crown issued specifically to commemorate a non-royal was produced that year featuring Churchill's portrait, and thus the regular coinage, including the penny, gained renewed attention from collectors around the world who began to take more interest in British coins as objects of national identity and remembrance. Now, going back to the 1 penny of 1965, it's important to recognize how this coin fits into the broader story of decimalization, because just 6 years later, in 1971, the United Kingdom switched to a decimal currency system, and the old penny was rendered obsolete, replaced by a new, smaller decimal penny that was worth 1/100th of a pound rather than 1/240th, and this monumental change meant that coins like the 1965 1 penny were demonetized and withdrawn from circulation starting in 1971. Although many remained in drawers, piggy banks, and collections for years to come, and some are still discovered today in old boxes and estates, their large size and striking appearance making them stand out from modern coinage. And so the 1965 penny is part of a bygone world, a world where the British monetary system reflected centuries of tradition, a world that was about to change forever, and that makes this coin not just an object of metal, but a time capsule. It carries with it the aesthetics, the politics, the economic structure, and the national identity of mid-20th century Britain, and for collectors today, the 1965 Elizabeth II 1 penny is often an entry point into the fascinating realm of British pre-decimal coinage. It is affordable, accessible, and readily available in uncirculated and circulated grades, yet it carries immense historical value and artistic merit, and it connects us directly to the early years of Queen Elizabeth's reign, time of post-war recovery, global transformation, and national pride. So whether you are a seasoned numismatist or a curious beginner, this coin offers a wealth of stories to uncover, from its design origins to its metallurgical composition, from its symbolic meaning to its role in everyday commerce. And as we hold it today, we can reflect not only on where it came from, but also on what it represents and how much has changed since it was first minted. And that concludes our deep dive into the Elizabeth II 1 penny of 1965, a truly remarkable coin that deserves its place in every historical collection. Thank you for joining us today on MC Coin World, and if you enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more coin stories from around the world. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the rich and fascinating story of the 1965 Elizabeth II 1 penny, a coin that is not just a relic of currency, but a chapter in the story of Britain itself, from the symbolism of Britannia to the youthful portrait of a newly crowned queen, from the weight of centuries of monetary tradition to the final years before decimalization. This coin carries it all, and here on MC Coin World, we honor the stories behind the metal, we explore the legacy behind every design, and We keep history alive one coin at a time. If you found value in this deep dive, Don. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts or your own memories of this coin, and most importantly, subscribe to MC Coin World, where every coin has a story and every story deserves to be told. Until next time, keep collecting, keep learning, and keep the past alive through every coin in your collection.